next up is my team. And so we started this journey as a team because we know what it's like to suffer in pain out there on the job. And we look at the bigger picture of the world, and we know what's happening in 100 years. And if you've been in our opening yesterday, our responsibility is bigger than putting sheets of paper on walls and making pretty pictures. And we have a massive role in the next century and beyond to play. And so we started out from a research perspective and a teaching perspective to ask, how are we going to create classrooms that allow this to happen? So I think my name is Calayde, I'm in architecture, and my colleague Johann is in structural engineering, and we're partnered up with Helene Potgieter in heritage architecture. And I think let's start our story and we get going. And Johann, you're up first. We're going to tag team this conversation, just go with the flow, enjoy it, and we will hand over to each other and tell our story. All right, go for it, Johann.
Good, thanks. Okay, hi everyone. So you've heard a bit about circularity by now, but maybe rephrase a little bit differently. Why should we care about the material in our buildings? Well, first of all, our sector is responsible for substantial greenhouse gas emissions, nearly 40% of global greenhouse emissions. And in addition to this substantial resource depletion, notably of sand for the production of concrete, and added to that, substantial waste. So the reason for all of this is because our sector is a very linear value chain traditionally, where we extract raw material for the manufacturing of building components and building materials, which we use to construct our buildings. So all of this, of course, costs a lot of money, but it's also associated with a lot of equivalent CO2, which adds to the embodied carbon. But unfortunately, we tend to forget this at some stage, and towards the end of a building's design life, or tragically many times long before that, we simply knock it down and throw the material away. And even this knocking down and throwing away comes with additional cost and embodied carbon. So the waste that we produce is even actually more expensive and has an even bigger embodied carbon. So the argument is basically to move away from raw resource use and towards rather looking at our urban landscape as a valuable mine for building material.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everybody. Just to introduce myself, my name is Helene Potgieter. I'm a professional architect. And just to give some context, before I actually studied architecture, I completed a fine arts degree, then migrated to architecture, and then ended up doing a postgrad in building conservation at the Architectural Association in London. I've had my own practice for the last 20 years. We are always a small team, somewhere between 5 and 10 people. I also like to say that we punch far above our weight. And how I became involved in this teaching adventure is that my firm, HP Architects, we've been involved for the last 6 years with the University of Pretoria, who, although their mandate is to educate, they are the custodians of a portfolio of about 1,000 buildings, of which about 40% of the buildings are protected by the Heritage Act, and that comes with challenges of its own. So we've been working with the university, with the facilities department, to assist them to obtain the necessary permits timeously in order to maintain buildings, in order for them to actually exercise their mandate, which is education. So why do we care about buildings and about building conservation? The image that you see here was taken, an image similar to this one, was taken 55 years ago on the 24th of December, 1968, aboard the Apollo 8 space mission. and it is the first image that was taken by a human being looking back at our beautiful, vulnerable planet. And what is actually quite, for me, the context here is that 55 years ago, we as human beings actually, for the first time, got a sort of a bird's eye view of our own planet, a planet that is 4.53 million years old, and is part of a universe that is 14 billion years old. Sorry, 4.53 billion years is the age of our planet. So, demolition waste, just to put that in context, just the USA, up to date, has generated 7,200 square kilometers of habitat was lost due to landfalls, and that is about 40% of the size of the Kruger National Park, and that is only the USA, and which is the Kruger National Park, which is about half the size of the country of the Netherlands. So the bottom line is our planet is a finite resource, and the legacy of our young people that we are actually leaving them with is not a good one. So, and I think just again to give some context with a few thoughts, in July this year, the UIA, the International Union of Architects, had their World Congress in Copenhagen. Krishna, head of department, was actually there. And the 10 takeaways from this conference was the following, and I'm just going to, these are just sort of thoughts. Work with existing, just think about existing building structures and just put the concept of reuse on the radar. Think carefully about doing new developments on green fields. Natural ecosystems, food production should be sustained regardless of the built environment. Point number 7, the whole issue around virgin mineral materials that should be used in construction when not be used whenever reuse is possible. No waste, or as little as possible waste produced or left behind after a construction project is completed. Sourcing of materials, local renewable materials should come first. Everything we build, look at the carbon capture and look at the carbon footprint. We all know the formula there. And then also when involved in development planning and construction, just also be aware of the impact that could have, that any construction project or development project could have on water ecosystems. Another interesting fact, you might be aware of this, you might not. The Pritzker Prize winners of the architectural prize, the Pritzker Prize of Architecture is the Nobel Prize of Architecture. And the winners in 2021 was this partnership. It was a French company, Anne Lacatour and Jean-Philippe Vazal, and they embraced the principle of no demolition. And this is a very interesting project. It's a social housing project in the city of Paris. And we all know that social housing is for the poorest of the poor. It's never glamorous. And they were appointed to actually refurbish a huge several street blocks of social housing. And what they did was they actually went and they had an interview with every single occupant, every single family in that block. And their conclusion was that for us, this might be a terrible block. It might be ugly, it might be bland, but for the people that live there, that is where they are connected, and that is home for them. So the decision was taken not to demolish, but to refurbish, and they have transformed this whole sort of block into the most incredible a block for the same inhabitants with rooftop gardens, safe areas for kids to play. And this is just a sign of the complete paradigm shift that is happening within the environment of architecture as well.
So that's just a bit of setting the scene, because we're coming from these 3 very different places: structure, heritage. My portfolio right now is innovation. And my question is, why is transdisciplinary learning important in the 21st century? And we've heard a lot about inter, multi, intra, But transdisciplinary means up and down and across. When you're interdisciplinary, you work alongside. But when you're transdisciplinary, you engage people who have nothing to do with you as well. Up and down and across. And why is this super important? And the reason it's super important is because I was on a trip recently to Rotterdam, where we had to figure out how to digital twin city in Africa. And we asked the city of Rotterdam, tell us how you digital twin city in Rotterdam. And why are you twinning? And he said to me something that actually stuck with me, and it's going to stick with me for a while, is that we have to recognize in the 20th century, we worked in a world where the social and the physical world was separated completely. And we never thought of them as the same thing. And because of this, we have specialities, we have industrialization, we work in independent and individual realities. But in today's world, we are completely different. We have a world where the social, physical, and digital is one thing. And if you still believe that the social, physical, and digital are separated, you are in a fantasy land. Doesn't matter which way you come from. And if we go into the 21st century in the future, we have to recognize that if we want to be effective in society, these three things is one reality. It's not separate realities. It's a shared reality. And if we want to work in this world and be in this world, never mind make money or anything else like that, if you just want to live as a society in this world, you must be able to work, think, and do things in complexity. You must be a complex thinker. You must be able to produce common ground with lots of different people and lots of different situations all the time, not just once, not just for your job, even at a personal level. You must be able to produce shared realities, whether this is a product, a thing, or just a way of being. And if we want to have an adaptable, flexible, useful society in the 21st century, in the built environment, we need to be human beings who can do this stuff, who know how to work together, who can solve complex problems, who can cross-skill and learn very quickly. Shamima, you were saying about the learning curve for professionals. It used to be 5 years. It's now 18 months. So the idea of a human society that doesn't know how to do this now, if we don't focus on that as educators, we're lost, completely lost. And we need to work on a human talent. We will cultivate that human talent to do so. Because the reality is, in the 21st century, we have pluralist societies in Africa. It's complicated societies. It's not single realities. It's shared realities. Lots of histories, lots of futures, lots of dreams, lots of things going on. We have a real climate, social, and social crisis. You cannot ignore it. It's happening right now. It's not coming. It's here. And our problems are very complex. You can't solve it from a single perspective at all. Not once, not in a building, not in a road, not in a physical world, not in a social world, not anywhere. And in South Africa, we have even more problems. If you talk about the built environment, the most important being our acute shortage of skills. Not want of people wanting to do it, but the capabilities of people to work in this complex shared way. And in cities, just as an example, we don't have enough leadership skills at all levels, not just the guy on top who says, do this. We need leadership at the bottom as much as we need it at the top. We need to develop that. We don't know how to work together. To collaborate doesn't mean I give you stuff. It means we labor together. We perform work together. We need to teach that if we want to succeed in the 21st century. And the other thing is, we don't know how to think forward. We are reactionary all the time. Everything we do is reactive. And I'm going to use the doctor analogy. If your doctor worked like this, you would be dead, right? And we have to recognize that in the built environment. Our human organism, our way of working and making habitat must shift. We simply cannot work together if we don't learn how to do that together. It's not possible. We learn too late. We learn in industry only 15 years in, you become a middle manager-ish kind of person. 15 years too late. It's 20 years too late if you add education to that. And we can't innovate and solve these problems if we don't share a common reality, a social, physical, and digital reality, a shared reality. It's simply not possible. So as educators, we need to create environments where you can practice how to do this. There's no other way. You can't read it from a textbook. You have to practice and become someone who's functional in this reality. So our job, our interest in backgrounds and the big picture stuff, how do we learn together? And how do we do this socially, physically, and digitally at once? How do we create an environment to do that? And that's what our case study is going to teach you today. So this story started a little bit earlier on because in my urban strategy class, we have very creative problems to solve. And this year, our topic was the waste systems of Hatfield. What are we going to do about it? Let's get going. And this is student work. So none of the work I show is my own. This is all the student work. And the students are sitting, hands up, show me your faces. There you go. These are our students who were part of this class, and they asked complex questions, and they explored creative things about what is going on in the waste or construction waste landscape of Hatfield. Your lab, it's right here. And from these complex questions, really insightful ideas came about how we could solve this problem called our urban mine, that we are not mining at all. We're sending all our waste to die somewhere else, and we are literally toxifying the world. And there's a lot of numbers to back this up. But the question that was really interesting is, if this is a constraint, a practical constraint that you must operate in, what if we mined our urban city, and only that, and stop the idea of resource at source at all? Perhaps there's enough stuff out there already, maybe 100 billion buildings of stuff, that we can think more creatively about. And long story short, we started realizing that if you reframe the actual problem in front of you as a circularity opportunity, maybe things will change. As well, heritage and circularity for me is starting to blend, actually. It's very weird. But we say, wait a minute, how are we going to do this? And the only way is to think about information, right? In all the different formats and ways we were talking about it yesterday and today and right now. And for us, it became very clear that BIM and twins are simply vehicles for circular built environment. It's a vehicle for us to do that. But to do that, we need to think about the how. Because it's not the tech that's the thing that we need. We've got all the tech. If you've seen the prop tech slides this morning, the landscape is vast. If you've seen the vendors in the room, it's an infinite landscape of tools. What we don't have is the culture of working together. You've seen this everywhere. You've had pain in the field, pain in the classroom, pain in learning. You've seen that everywhere. So before we tech, we will culture. So how are we actually going to do this for realsies in the built environment in South Africa? Because we are very bad. We know that. You don't have to tell us that again. And we continue to be bad. So our technology isn't solving the badness at all. And if you look at the adoption of good ideas in South Africa, we're very aware but very slow to adopt. All of this is human behavior issues, not technology issues, not complex problem-solving issues, human behavior issues. So we said, before we teach, we must shift our culture, and we have to understand what we're shifting from and to. So what are we going to change? We're going to stop working in this culture of division. Me, you, us, them. Stop it. We're not going to do that. We're not untouchable experts in silos. I know nothing about structures. I can learn. He knows nothing about BIM. He can learn. She knows nothing about BIM. She has learned. We are not experts in silos. We are learners together. That's a shift we're making. Because all built environment projects are transdisciplinary. You always work with beginners. No, it's up and down all the time. It's a stupid idea that it's a specialist world. The other one is there's a massive culture of disrespect in our industry. We have something bad to say about everybody and they about us. Yeah? Have you had that? Vibes? Yeah. Mostly because I don't need to know or care about your job. So I don't have to pay attention to your work. So I'm not going to. This is fundamentally disrespectful culture, it's cultural problem, right? And we are saying the result of that cultural problem is we make a lot of nonsense. And we can see this in everything, the physical paper world, the BIM world, it does not matter. The result of this disrespect is we create crap everywhere. And we're proud of that, and we think that's a good thing. Most of the built environment work, if you go and find out the math on this, is wasted effort. Coordination waste, redoing, bad litigation problems, as Rod was trying to phrase it well. Most of the work we do is stupid nonsense work because we don't respect each other. So we need to shift that culture. The third thing is, there's a culture of ignorance and we're proud of it. You're a QS, I'm not, I don't need to know. I'm an architect, you're not, you don't need to know. Now that's a huge obstacle for us because if the stuff I learned from my teaching crew has improved my architecting, has improved my urban strategizing, has improved my digital twinning, but if I keep on thinking it's my work versus your work, we're in trouble. So we need to shift that to realize that the built environment's one big ecosystem. We're all going to be living there, we're already in it. And we need to take a holistic perspective to do that. We have to shift that culture. The fourth thing is we have a big tendency in our society and the built environment to think about my job right now and nothing else. Short-term focus. Short-term pursuits as well. Task-based thinking, not process-based thinking. And we can't afford that anymore. We're way beyond that point. We need to shift that to realize that we're in a built environment, that our projects and our society and our world, our habitat will last for centuries beyond us, not just because I finished my milestone on Friday, if you're lucky. So with that shift, we said we're going to behave differently as a teaching team. We're going to set up a social, digital, physical environment that shifts culture. It's going to take us a while to adjust. It has. We're adjusting, we're learning, we're doing. But we're starting with respect. And the first thing we want to say is thank you to our owners. Thank you, UP Facilities, for your generosity to allow us to practice on your projects. Without you, we couldn't figure out what the value production must become. The next one is thank you to our students. If they didn't want to do this crazy thing with us, we would not have an opportunity to make a classroom, right? So thank you so much. Your enthusiasm and creativity is evident. Then I have to say thank you to our industry. Lots of industry people do not want to learn or try at all, especially if they've been legacy industry players. Without a legacy industry player helping and coming along, we couldn't practice teaching in a new way. And then our teaching team, which is now everybody is a teacher in our team, we have to demonstrate behavior. We can't just say it, right? So we have to be vulnerable enough to oopsie along the way, and we don't know everything. And that's the culture of the classroom that we set up for this unit. And it results in these kinds of values, right? We commit, we say that, we express it, we do it, to work very open, very collaboratively, and engage everybody that has an interest. We learn intentionally from each other. I've learned so much from structures this year, and that I've never learned before. I would never have had the opportunity to learn that before. I will cross-skill myself, and we've done it many times. We learn by doing the thing, not talking about the thing, being in action. We seek long-term impacts with our BIMing, and right now we'll go into the project in detail. We create safe-to-fail environments. Please fail fast, figure it out, do it without me, do it with your, I don't care, but figure it out. And experiment your way to the end. I'm saying this because yesterday we talked about the stages of BIM. We said, what is stage 0 for your project? What's your intention for your project? You've got to create a social, physical, digital environment where learning is possible and behavioral change is possible. So here's our team. Hello, team. This is where we started, and 3 weeks later, people joined in. We did not invite them. They showed up, and we are now one team. We're not a teacher-student relationship. We're not there at all. We're going to keep that till the end, and we're going to do it very intentionally. So I'm going to shift over now to Helene to give us some context of the project, but that's the stage 0 classroom environment, the intention of the space. And now let's get into the what we are BIMing.
Okay, thanks, Calayde. So again, the field of speciality of my company, HB Architects and Heritage Architects, is actually at the interface of commercial scale construction projects with very, very vulnerable historic fabric that is extremely vulnerable to the brutalities of the construction reality. So these are on the left-hand side just 2 good examples to show where we have actually proved the economic sense of conservation, of building conservation. First one here is the Madeleine Hotel in Pretoria Street. The client, the owner of the building, was ready to actually demolish this building, push it all off to a landfill and to start with new build. And we actually proved to her that there would be a 40% saving with respect to conserving, restoring, and refurbishment to a very minimal scale. And the most interesting outcome of this initiative is today that all her patrons actually want to live in this wing where the ambiance is and where the character is. And what we also did here is, because the narrative obviously is also nowadays one of the most important aspects of architecture. And we have, there's a beautiful conference facility within this hotel. And we went to the City of Tshwane archives, and we actually sourced old photos of Pretoria from that area. And we actually put up an exhibition of the history of that area of old Pretoria. People we all gravitate towards, the narrative and to understand, where we come from. This actually is an interesting case study at the University of Pretoria on one of the campuses. The Vergeet My Nie female residence is obviously also a historic building, protected by by the National Heritage Resources Act, number 25 of 1999. And when we started to open up here, we realized that above the ceiling line there was a whole another volume. And also by means of a financial modeling, we showed to the University of Pretoria, which is our client, that at 50% of the development cost of a new bedrooms, we could actually insert 14 new bedrooms in the loft space there. And just as a matter of interest, the development cost for a resident, a university residence room, is equal to the development cost of a 3-star hotel bedroom. And so this is just a before. We've started to actually gut the whole space. These are incredibly beautiful Oregon pine beams. And what you see there is actually the final result of the bedrooms, which looks like a boutique hotel, if I may say that. So these are the beautiful old Oregon pine portal frames. We inserted Velux roof windows in the roof space. We did not replace the corrugated sheeting, because the corrugated sheeting that was manufactured 100 years ago can last another 100 years. So we restored, we repaired, we inserted 2 layers of insulation, and with the result is that these dormer bedrooms are actually cool in summer and warm in winter. So then also just another interesting aspect here is, and this is now where our project comes in, the 2 greenhouses that form the basis of the project that we will start to discuss now are actually situated on the experimental farm, which is a fully working farm as a campus of the University of Pretoria. As you all know, it's on the intersection of the N4 and the N1. And it might be in the future, and I'm just postulating, I'm not giving, this is not factual, but the experimental farm might actually be relocated. And when I started to talk to Johann and Calayde, and the 2 greenhouses that we will show you now is actually on our radar this year as part of the Heritage Project. And when Johann explained what his whole philosophy is about circularity in our industry, we identified the 2 greenhouses as a potential case study for documenting with a view in the future to disassemble and to assemble in another, maybe in another form, maybe on another place, on another site. Then, very interesting, also just to show you as part of what we do, the level of modeling that we do, and these are details that were generated in my office. The current scanning technology cannot assist us to actually obtain this level of detailing. So we revert back to the boermakerplan methods. And what you see here is actually how we modeled these, the profiling, the historic gutters, with the hopper boxes. So we use a profiling tool, and we actually convert that into 3D models. And very interesting, I am waiting for the day when the scanning fraternity can actually come to us and say to us, we can actually offer you this level of detail. Because unfortunately, thank you. So unfortunately, we need to work to the level of, to the millimeter of accuracy. So please, thank you. So just again, this is another interesting case study, the old arts building, which is the crown jewel of this campus. You will see it's under scaffolding at the moment. So again, for us to create the level of accuracy that we do here, because we even do stone mapping, and I'll show you now the reason why. We use, as I've showed you, our boermakerplan method on the previous slide, and we use a combination still of photogrammetry and also electronic surveying. And if we can just go, thank you, to the next slide. And this is just to show you as a matter of interest, old arts. The clock tower is under scaffold at the moment. We are actually doing a restoration of the roof and the line above first floor ceiling level. We are replacing approximately, I would say, 100 sandstone blocks as well. And just to show you, this is what we do. We actually we do the stone mapping. And at the point when we are ready for handover, we will be able to say to facilities, in the year 2023, block number blah, blah, blah were actually replaced as part of the process. And that is just a very interesting image of the west facade of the Westminster Abbey in London. That's where Queen Elizabeth II was actually buried from the Abbey. And this stone mapping, this facade, the drawing was created by hand. Every individual stone is mapped. And that what you see there is just a detail of the top of one of the towers there. So stone mapping is happening. We have just taken it, I think, maybe to a next level. Thank you.
There we go. Thanks. So yeah, it was a really good opportunity to, of course, for me to partner with a BIM expert and a heritage and data capturing expert in this initiative. And so the buildings that form the focus of this initiative is really considered as a case study. So a case study where we are exploring effective ways, methods, and details of how to capture sufficient structural information that will support decision making towards selectively deconstructing existing building stock for extended reuse. This might be, as Helene mentioned, to maybe reconstruct a facility in its original form, but it might even be to construct something entirely new. And so what the focus of this initiative mainly is at this stage is, first of all, to investigate how to most effectively capture all the information that we need to develop a digital material inventory. So a digital inventory of the bag of material, if you will, that we could potentially physically deconstruct from these buildings for reconstruction. So that includes things such as element, shape, size, material properties, end connections, so speaking to ease of disassembly, information such as this. And then what we eventually want to prove with this case study, or hopefully at least, is the extent of benefit, not only financially, but also in terms of environmental benefit in using such a deconstruction process towards physically extracting this material for reuse, as opposed to purchasing and building with an equivalent set of new building material. First, Helene?
Is that me?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll continue after a couple of
Thank you.
slides.
So this is our case study. So we have here greenhouse 1 and greenhouse 2. And what you actually see here is an extraction of the presentation by our student group. And so this is greenhouse 1. There's something very charming about these buildings, I have to say. So what we did, you can go to the next slide, Calayde. So what we did was we actually reverted to, in our office, our team, we said, okay, iPad Pro with an app. What app did we use, Jared? Polycam. So, and we said, okay, we're going back to basics. And Jared, put up your hand. So Jared is one of my interns this year, and this model was created by Jared, then exploded, and then taken to the level of detail, you know, where we will be able to unpack the entire model for the purpose of what Johann has in mind, and just to have a full record of what's. And actually, Jared will be working up until the end of the year only on this model, and able to get, like, you know, we can use the analogy of a Meccano set to be able to unpack all the elements and for future possible circularity. And Johann has already identified Emma, are you here? Our postgrad student, engineering student, that will be doing her postgrad on exactly this subject this year. So there's a very interesting momentum building up here. So just to say, here's our iPad Pro and our Polycam app that we used. And, you know, we are still, the conclusion still is, please, if the scanning fraternity could come up with solutions for the detail that we require. And then also, just as a matter of interest, we are also busy in the office to build up a library of historic building materials. For example, the Kirkness sort of bricks, there's a whole, the Kirkness factory was actually where the old teachers training college was, opposite Little Company of Mary. So there's an incredible catalogue still available, obviously. And we are actually, you know, wherever we can find real-time sort of examples still of Kirkness bricks, we scan them and we put them into a library. Same with the coronation bricks that actually came from Durban. This is one of the doors that were modeled by my colleague Wayne as part of the Vergeet My Nie sort of, you know, initial work that we did, the modeling of 3D modeling, before we started with the restoration of the building. And then, as you all know, these are the Marseille brick tiles that actually come from the city of Marseille in France. And then this is one of the historic Kirkness clay roof tiles that come from the roof of the city hall of our city of Tshwane, Pretoria City Hall. Then again, I just want to, just talk from an industry perspective. What are the opportunities in our country here? And I think there are many. We have helped clients to actually achieve BEE accreditation by means of skills transfer and development projects that we've done. And they are then, you know, hours spent are logged, there's a monetary value associated to that, and that then, with the necessary affidavits and documentation, is actually then handed in as a BEE, accreditation document for the relevant companies. Then this is just an example of a skills transfer and development project that we did at the SA Army HQ with the Works Regiment of the SA Army. Again, then also just very high level, very interesting. My company is in conjunction with Flow-Centric Technologies, that is a South African-based IT company, and also Technologies, which is an Australian-based shipbuilding company. We are looking at, from the HBIM perspective, at aspects that are not currently being addressed in any form of software globally, and we are developing a product that can be superimposed over any software product in order to augment software to be also HBIM, to address HBIM issues in the environment of facilities management. Okay, there we go.
All right, so in addition to what Helene and her team were doing, we also scanned our 2 greenhouses, both LiDAR scanning and photogrammetry using fancy drones, scanning inside and outside. But a concept that came out very strongly in this initiative early on is that BIM as a workflow to support value-based decision making is not always grabbing for the most technologically advanced tool. It's using the right tool for the right job at the right level of detail. And so in our case, that involved, to a more extensive boermakerplan maybe than Helene, maybe from my Van der Merwe Free State experience, a shovel and a pickaxe, and a measuring tape to measure foundation sizes, a Schmidt hammer to determine concrete compressive strength, a drill to figure out how thick surface beds are, and simply just our eyes and our common sense to figure out how the building actually fits together. We also adapted a 5-tier structural condition assessment rating system to, as objectively as possible, evaluate the condition of the various types of material in the building. So, just on that, we followed this 5-tier condition assessment rating system on each of the level of details throughout the initiative so far, to also investigate how would such a condition rating differ from one level of detail to the next. At what level of detail do you actually no longer see a substantial difference in the rating?
The reason we're doing this is because we want to practice together as teams, and BIM is an excuse to do that. The digital, physical, social world is one place, and we need to create those environments. But it also means that we all have to share realities, even though we're coming from different angles, perspectives, objectives, goals, whatever. The information is common. It's the common ground, right? So when the students work here, we're all on site together, asking each other questions, training from each other, doing physical work for the digital goal, if I can say it like that. And there's a lot of things we could have taught the student. We could have said, here is BIM execution plan, I give you, right? I could have done that. We could have said, student, here is model, I give you. We could have said, student, here is library, textbook, I give you. But that's not very useful to learn teamwork and collaboration. It's not very useful to learn problem solving. What is useful is to learn together, to build together, to learn together, to work together, do it physically in the field, do it digitally as well, and translate. That is useful in the classroom. So our objective wasn't to give stuff, but is to make stuff together with our client, with our cities, with our owners. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the perspective as educators, what we've learned from this journey, and I know we're over time, but that's what it is. Everything I show you now is student work, not ours. Students learned, and they've voiced it many times, and they've expressed it in their reports and whatever, that to create intelligence requires intelligence. And you have to practice that. You're not born with it. You have to practice becoming smart. You have to go on a journey. You have to physically embody this stuff, whether it's digital or physical. And as we make mistakes, we learn. And as we learn together, we get better. We could have given them VEPs, but it's better to develop them, because then you learn together, oopsies. You learn why we do stuff. The quicker they picked up on this, the faster the capability went up. So very quickly, it was difficult in week 2, but gets really easy in week 4, 5, 6, and 7. The students go through maturity themselves. Right? The students in this classroom is architecture, interiors, QS, civils, and structural students. They're all working together, solving different problems, but on the same project. Isn't that a lot like the real world? And as they go up in levels of development and detail, they have to iterate, because things change as they mature up in levels of detail. They also have to solve problems. This is an ongoing project. It's incomplete. So I'm not here to talk details. They have to solve it together, because they don't all have the answers. The architects don't know how structural assessment works at all. If we wait 15 years for them to learn that in the field, in industry, it's too late, 20 years too late. But now they are learning this stuff, and they're learning usefulness between details. Is it useful to do this way? Is it helpful to do it at that level? Where's the usefulness cutoff point? Not perfect, but useful. This is super important. I'd like you to go and explore their posters outside, because one of the outcomes is not just their learning by doing, it is their learning together by doing. And this is super important for us. You can see this in the results and the interest of coming to things like BIM Harambee. The digital conversation isn't about the toys, it's about working together. And I'm really interested to say, can we have a student, a young professional at Harambee, to showcase what others are interested in, not just us. The students learn that as models change, so do we. And this is very important, because we tend to teach as if everything is finite and fixed. But as we learn that our models mature, we learn our processes mature, our behavior changes, and so it goes. And you can see it in one of their outcome reports. We started this way, thinking, this is my job. I am the heritage architect, this is my role. This is how the students interpreted their jobs. This is what the Department of Civil Engineering is going to do. This is what architecture is going to do. Do you recognize this in our way of educating students, that we do this? And 2 weeks later, they realized that's not the world of work. Because as we needed to figure things out together, our goal is to produce a material passport that we can circulate in the future, right? Tag, brick tag, whatever. And it requires us to think very differently about work. It requires us that we are not here at all. This is a lie. We're here. And this thing moves. Emma's role moved from the left to right. Stefan moved up and down as needs-driven and information-driven questions and outcomes were produced. You cannot teach this in a textbook. It's impossible. You have to teach it in an environment where you can embody this. We also learned that there's way more values. One of the research reports is just about the value production in working this way through HBIM. Right? That there's way more values for everybody that can be shared if we do more of this and less of that. The story of this classroom is very intriguing to others. This entire back row showed up on their own accord. They're not in my class. They're not supposed to be there. They're not in any of these disciplines. They're not on the project. I don't even think they're honor students. I don't even know where they came from. But they all showed up to witness because they're interested. They're interested, they're capable, they want to work together, they can work together. Don't wait for them to grow up in whatever profession they're in. Do it now. They have the skills, let them figure it out together. You'll make better people. Interesting enough, again, QSs, not in the job, volunteered themselves to teach architects QSing. Isn't that what we want? Architects are teaching QSs architecting, and so it goes. We have to create classrooms where the social, physical, digital is one space. And BIM is a very useful excuse to get us there. So at the end, I just want to ask Johann for a couple of reflecting thoughts, and then we'll finish our session.
So this case study really forms part of more broad research towards a more sustainable built environment. And we hope to build that further into the digital space towards exploring means of parametrically, first digitally mining such an existing building stock in order to optimize how we would then physically extract these building materials for reuse. And lots of research groups all around the world are looking at these kind of topics, including material passports, which is of course important for distributing such material. And although many research groups in developed countries are already looking at this theme, what sets us apart here in Africa in this theme is that on any typical Tuesday, hundreds of people are building with waste all around the country, or the continent for that matter, although it's of course from a very unfortunate disposition. But our argument is that there must be lessons to be learned from informality in how they use waste, and how and that we should be able to transfer that knowledge to a more commercial built environment.
So from my point, and where I'm coming full circle here, is having started off as a fine arts graduate, what you see here, and the analogy that between the three of us that we've actually concluded to, was that the analogy of, I'll tell you now what the Bottega is. The Bottega was in the 15th, 16th century Renaissance period, was the workshop where young artists came to learn skills through learning by doing. And what you see here is actually a beautiful print of an Italian Renaissance bottega workshop. And what you see there is the maestro. You know, he's busy with his major artwork. And all the people around him here are there to learn. The young man there is actually grinding pigment for the paint, in preparation for paint. I'm not sure what that guy is doing. I would like to think that this guy is stretching a canvas. I'm not too sure. And then obviously this guy is moving up in the ranks, but he's now allowed to do portraits of minor people. And then as you move up in the ranks, you would get to a point as one of the youngsters to maybe paint the hind leg of the dragon on the maestro's masterwork. And that is how people learned, by virtue of being exposed. And that is exactly what we are doing here. And that is why we say that our 21st digital ecosystem is our global modern day Bottega. And I would just like to revert a few terms here back to the initial statement. So learning by doing is our skills transfer and development. The students here is our interns today. And then also the other point that I would like to reflect on is that architecture as a means of collaboration, not as a means of being the maestro or the kingpin, but as a means of collaboration and with the creative inputs that we could actually give, share as a profession. We are poised to find solutions for current problems, for example, sustainability. Just two images here. This is the workshop of Antonio Gaudi, who's the architect of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. And this was the workshop under the cathedral. And you can see here that is just a 19th century Bottega. And this is obviously that is Sir Norman Foster. That is him with a view on his office in one of the tower blocks where his office is actually, where he resides, his office is there as well. And this is part of the models that he has built. And this is the modern day Bottega. So we are just coming full circle. There's actually nothing new. We can just improve.
Yeah, so to get to this world, the digital ecosystem is very helpful. It gives us shared realities. It gives us, doesn't matter what you teach, but if you change the culture of teaching with this in mind, we would get professionals next year that are ready to do this work, not in 20 years. And that's the kind of shift we have to make. All right, so that's our story. Thank you very much for your time, and then we will finish.